The story takes place in Tokyo. Satoru Mikami is an ordinary person, 37 years old, never had a girlfriend. On the street, he meets a friend with a girl. They invite Satoru to dinner at his favorite place. But at one point, some psycho ran with a knife for a couple. Satoru, without having time to think, pushes his friend away and takes the blow. Bleeding, he begins to hear voices inside and at the same time loses consciousness. Already in the dark, he realizes that he does not feel pain and the limbs themselves. Satoru sees rocks in space and feels himself transforming into something slimy and fluid. He became a blue slime, not needing constant food and its excretion. While talking to himself, he accidentally asks a question, but the voice assistant answers it in his head. The former Satoru begins to eat the magic herb while questioning everything in his head along the way. After playing, he falls into the sea and realizes that he does not even need to breathe. He draws water into himself and spits it out with force to make a dash. The slime ends up with some dragon whom he insults at first, but they later make a pact. The dragon Veldora promises to give him sight in exchange for the fact that the mucus will not be afraid of him when he sees him, because he had no acquaintances for a very long time. Satoru gains the vision skill and gets scared when he sees a huge storm dragon in front of him. Veldora says that he has been imprisoned here for more than 300 years. He attacked the city, but underestimated the strength of the hero who defended the settlement. Satoru offered him friendship, to which he was initially embarrassed, but eventually agreed. Together, they try to figure out how to get Veldora out of captivity. The voice in my head tells me that there are very few ways to get out. The dragon had to crawl into the stomach of the slime in order to get out of here. But before that, they decide to exchange names. Veldora is Tempest and Satoru is Rimuru. Tempest fit inside the slime, and in the cities closest to the forest under which Veldora was imprisoned, rumors about the loss of the dragon had already spread. Rimuru learns most of the skills on his way out of the cave. It eats the affected opponents and appropriates their abilities. 10 days later, he finds a door that immediately opens in front of him. 3 adventurers emerge from it. As they moved away from the door, Rimuru jumped out and ran through the forest. He meets a pack of goblins who will immediately bow before him. They take him to their village. The goblins found Rimuru due to the fact that they felt a strong aura because he did not turn off the tongues of magic from himself. The village head asks him for help. The goblins were attacked by about 100 wolves, which greatly reduced their numbers. And one of the dead was the son of a headman and an excellent warrior. At that moment, the howl of the beasts was heard and Rimuru agreed to protect the settlement. He looks at the villagers and realizes that most of them are not fit to fight, but he tries to lift their spirits before the battle. Rimuru visits the sick, and with the help of the magical herbs he has absorbed inside himself, he heals the wounds of each warrior. At night, the wolves gather for another attack, because they know that Veldora no longer protects the forest. Near the village, the wolves see a built fence. Rimuru tried to stop them, but they laughed and ran at them. Their leader fell on another sticky thread and was killed by Rimuru. Slime turned into the same wolf, and instead of escaping, a pack of wolves bowed before him. In the morning, Rimuru rallied everyone, and now the wolves and goblins were in the same tribe. Since none of them had a name, he decided to name each one. The goblins were very happy with every name. The elder was named Rigard. The time of the wolves has come. The son of the leader was named as Ranga. But at one point, Rimuru lost control and spread over the stump. It ran out of mana, as giving out names was a very expensive undertaking. After 3 days, he woke up full of energy. It turned out that the goblins were not just happy. The name for a goblin meant great power for them. Each of the goblins and wolves has become a different version of themselves. They were overjoyed at the awakening of their master. He, having gathered everyone nearby, tells them 3 rules. Do not attack people, do not attack other races, do not fight among themselves. He also appoints the headman as the lord of all goblins. Rimuru began rebuilding the settlement and setting up life within. While the goblins were busy separating everyone according to business, Rimuru, along with wolves and some goblins, went to the dwarven settlement. Slime feels that he is guilty before Ranga for the death of his father, but he does not hold a grudge because he spared him in battle. They arrived at the dwarven cave, but Rimuru only took Gobet with him. There was a huge queue in front of the entrance. There, a couple of robbers get to the bottom of them, but since it was forbidden to offend people, Rimuru asked Gobet to close his eyes and ears. He turned into a huge wolf, and the blows of the robbers simply bounced off him. With his cry, he frightened off the robbers, but also attracted the attention of the guards. They were taken into custody. Rimuru helped the dwarves in the mine because they needed a magic potion. Soon the guard released him and promised to introduce him to the craftsman. Gunsmith Cajun was an excellent blacksmith. The minister gave him an impossible task to forge 20 swords before the end of the week, but for this he did not have enough time and materials, namely magic ore. Rimuru remembered that when he was reborn, he managed to collect just this ore. Having pulled it out in front of Kajin, everyone was shocked because such an amount would have been mined in the mine for a very long time. In return, Rimuru only asked for a few artisans for his village, but after thinking a little more, he loads the sword into his system and makes just 20 copies. Kajin is shocked and doesn't even know how to repay him. Thanks to him, the craftsman managed to complete the order and send all 20 swords. For this, the dwarves invited Rimuru to a bar with elves who he really liked. He was like in paradise because he was served and treated. The girls decided to tell fortunes to him, narrowed through a magic ball. A Japanese girl appeared there. But at one point, Minister Bester came to them, placing an order. He starts to humiliate Rimuru for being a slime. He pours the booze on him, but Kajin stands up for him and beats up the minister. After that, Rimuru, Kajin, and his artisans were taken into custody. But fortunately, the execution does not shine for them, only a fine after the trial. It turns out that Bester used to serve with Kajin, but then they had a big fight, and the minister framed the artisan. They promised to go to his village after prison as a token of gratitude and the beginning of friendship. The court was attended by the king, his eldest Vargo. A defender was appointed for the accused, but even he was bribed. As a result, the judge gave a verdict that Kajin and the rest of the artisans were sentenced to work in the caves. But the king changed the punishment. Instead of work, he appointed exile. After the trial, the king was left alone with Bester. He learned that once the minister threw his blame on Kajin and waited for him to confess. But Bester, even this time, did not admit guilt. Therefore, the king said not to appear before his eyes again. As a result, Rimuru with the artisans, saying goodbye to the guards, went into the forest to the allies. Those 3 adventurers who explored the dragon caves returned to their commander and reported that Veldora was missing. The commander understood what this meant, and that is why he sent them to explore the forest without rest. The adventurers were furious, but could not disobey. They are met by Shizu Aizawa, a scout sent by the king. She joins them in investigating the forest. In the camp, the artisans trained the goblins to the fullest, but about 500 more goblins arrived in the village. Rigurd was promoted from lord to goblin king. Rimuru had to give everyone a name, and after that again lie still for 3 days. Gobuta managed to learn how to summon a wolf because Rimuru almost forgot him in the dungeon. Rigurd informed him that the scouts in the forest had noticed a group of people. These were the adventurers from Shizu. They were attacked by a flock of huge ants. Aizawa dealt with them but was saved from the latter by Rimuru. He brought them to the camp and fed them. Rimuru remembered that he saw these adventurers in that cave, and Shizu is that Japanese woman who was his betrothed. In private, they talk about the fact that they are both from Japan. Through the transfer of memories, Rimuru shows her moments from her life, but at one point she is writhing in pain, and they are interrupted by Kajin. As a child, Shizu found herself under a barrage of bombs in her city. She was saved by Leon Cromwell. He instilled a demon in her, and that is why she survived. In the morning, she wakes up from a nightmare. She can no longer stay and says goodbye to Rimuru and the rest of the population. But just before leaving, the demon Ifrit wakes up in her, and she begins to radiate flames. Rimuru evacuates the goblins, sending Rigurd and Rigurd to the task. Shizuo finally transforms into Ifrit and douses the entire village with fire. They don't run away from an adventurer because they can't leave a comrade. Rimuru and Ranga dodge the fire attacks of the dragons summoned by the demon. He copies the ice spears of Ellen, one of the adventurers, and copying them in large numbers, directs them at the dragons. Ifrit made an explosion that hurt the adventurers. Rimuru directed Rangu to carry them to safety. The demon created copies of itself and surrounded Rimuru. He in turn neutralized them all with ice spears. Ifrit created a seal that plunged Rimuru into a waterfall of fire. He had already said goodbye to life when he realized that any fire attacks were useless to him. He defeated the demon using his special predator attack. Ifrit was inside him, where he was left alone with Veldora. Rimuru left Shizu in the infirmary, where she told him about her childhood, how she was possessed by a demon, and how she learned to control it within herself. Her main dream is to find and talk to the one who called her. Rimuru says his real name before being reborn. Shizu asks him to eat it because he cannot live in such fear of his family. He has to do this in order for her to have a pleasant dream forever. When Rigurd entered, he saw a girl instead of Rimuru. She looked like a miniature Shizu, but it was still Rimuru. The adventurers got ready to leave and said goodbye to everyone. Before they left, they asked Rimuru to transform into a human, and then they said goodbye to him as they did to Shizu. He also gave them excellent equipment. After leaving, Rimuru erected a grave in Shizu's honor on the hill where they once spoke. The construction of new houses began, and Rimuru fully automated the development in the village. He increasingly began to be in the form of a man. Rimuru also learned all the skills of Ifrit, and therefore now knows how to create his copies, and not only. In the human body, he knows how to feel tastes, which is why he decided to come to the goblins for a feast at least once. Rimuru decided to visit Veldora's cave and test out some new skills. He began to wear Shizu's mask more often, which suppressed his magical aura. At one point, Rimuru received a message from Ranji asking for help. Running to the place, he sees many comrades put to sleep. It turned out to be 6 ogres who immediately suspected him of demonic origin because of the mask. Only a couple of fighters remained on their feet. He instructed Rongme to defeat 1 girl and he will win the other 5 himself. He defeated 3 of them without even blinking. The leader of the ogres and the wise old man remained. The sage immediately noticed the peculiarities of some monsters in Rimuru's attacks. He quickly appears behind Rimuru and cuts off his arm. This surprises him, but he decided to show all his strength to the orcs. With this, Rimuru scared the enemy, but the girl managed to finally dissuade her. The ogres revealed that this mask, like Rimuru's, was worn by one of the attackers on their camp and apologized for their carelessness. Together, they went to the village for a feast. All the goblins were watching Rimuru's first bite as it was his first meal in this life. The ogres said that their village was attacked by orcs. This is very strange because the orcs are 100 times weaker than them. At their head stood a demon, wearing a mask like his. Rimuru calls them into his ranks so they can get back on their feet in the meantime. The ogre prince, after some thought, agreed. Rimuru decided to name them as well, but fell asleep almost immediately. Upon awakening, he sees ogres that have turned into demons. He named the Prince Benimaru and the Princess Shuna. Orc attacks are discussed in nearby settlements. They believe that the birth of a new orc lord is to blame. At the camp, Hakuro is the sage of the ogres at the camp training Gobut and the other goblins. Benimaru tells Rimuru that recently a demon came to their village and offered to give them a name, but he was driven away. Perhaps this was one of the reasons for the attack of the orcs. Zoe reported that there were lizards roaming the woods nearby. Their leader is Gabble, who is about to become the king of the lizards soon. Shuna shows the artisans how ogre silk is made. Together with her, Shine argues over who will look after Rimuru. Shine decided to feed him, but her food didn't look edible. Rimuru decided to give a spoonful of food to Gobuko, who fell down dead. Since then, Benimaru has been assigned to check her food. Gabble arrived in the village with his fighters. He says that orcs roam the forests nearby. Gabble towers over them and calls them into his ranks. He does not believe that such fighters are commanded by ordinary slime. Rangba challenges Gabugo to a duel with Gabble. Surprisingly, the goblin wins because during this time he has mastered shadow movement. All Gabble's fighters were in shock because they were counting on his victory. They run away, promising to win in the future. The orc army was about 200,000 in number. They head towards the lizard swamp. During Rimuru's meeting, Sui was contacted by a trainee, one of the dryads in the forest, through a doppelganger. She came with an interesting request, to exterminate the Orc Lord. This meant that the Orc Lord was not a myth after all. It turns out that in order to feed such an army, they ate everything in their path. Their goal is the complete absorption of all races. Rimuru agrees to help, but still, you should enlist the help of the lizards. In the forest, Gabble wakes up and Laplace is standing next to his fighters. He hints that he should become the Lizard King. At this time, Soi arrived at the acting Lizard King. He proposes an alliance on Rimuru's behalf. The king agreed, but he needed a meeting with Rimuru himself, and Soi said not to engage in battle with the orcs until that time. All this time, they only defended the gate. But at one point, Gabble arrived, overthrew his father, and took his whirlwind spear. Father was imprisoned, and Gabble was not going to wait for the attack. When the orcs got into the swamps of the lizards, they fought back. The warriors respected the spirit of Gabble, but his inattention brought many victims. Orcs devoured their fallen comrades, and it was this that made them move on.